Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
On this episode of the Means of Grace podcast, I interview Kim Richmond and Jonathan Brake, two leaders of the Western North Carolina Conference Creation Care Team. As we near Earth Day, recognized on April 22nd, Kim and Jonathan provide practical ways to take creation care next steps in each of the 5 areas of the life of the church: worship, discipleship, stewardship, evangelism, and mission. Welcome to the Means of Grace podcast. I'm here today in recognition of Earth Day 2023, which is April 22nd. And I'm talking with leaders of our Creation Care Ministry team. My name is Brian Mateer, and I'm the Director of Missional Engagement for the Western North Carolina Conference, which includes disaster response ministries and also being the staff liaison for our Creation Care team. I'm also a commissioned United Methodist Earth Keeper, and I'm here with Reverend Jonathan Brake, clergy and founder of the Conference Creation Care Ministry, also a United Methodist Earth Keeper, and Kim Richmond, the layperson that's currently the coordinator of the Conference Creation Care Ministry, United Methodist Earth Keeper. Kim, would you like to start us off and tell us a little bit about the Conference Creation Care Ministry and how it relates to Earth Day and some of the things that we're up to?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Thanks for asking me to join you today, Brian. Earth Day is a great day of action, and it's something that I think most people are familiar with because it brings a lot of attention to protecting the environment. I read that last year's Earth Day, there were over 1 billion people from 193 countries who participated in Earth Day, doing activities like planting trees and cleaning roadsides and cleaning streams and planting pollinator gardens and community gardens and any number of actions that are helping the environment. And really what our goal is and how we relate, the Creation Care Ministry team relates to that, is that we want to help local churches integrate the actions that we associate with Earth Day and that are so obvious on all of the media, and integrate those into the everyday life of the local church and the congregation. I mean, if you think of the slogan that I think we've all heard, every day is Earth Day, that's what our goal is.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. That's a great way to kind of frame the conversation. Jonathan, I mentioned in our introductions the Earthkeeper program that all of us are, and it's a great way for folks to kind of take a next step in creation care. Would you share a little bit about the Earthkeepers program?
Absolutely. I would be glad to. The Earthkeepers program was begun by Global Ministries in 2016, so it's 7 years old now. And it's really designed to train United Methodist laity and clergy here in the United States for local grassroots efforts. Some of those are done within a congregation, some in a community, some collaborating with other organizations, churches, nonprofits, things like that in the area. And really, it's a training that ties together several different components to prepare our United Methodists to be about doing creation care and creation justice. And so in the training, you'll find our Christian faith from biblical passages and teachings that have come down through the tradition. Also, United Methodist theology and teachings from places like our Book of Discipline, Book of Resolutions. The bishops have had a number of statements through the years, and other places where we as United Methodists have spoken about how we put our faith into action around creation care and creation justice. There's also in the training now a strong element of anti-racism because so much of the mistreatment of God's creation really affects minorities and people of color here in this country and around the world through things like where do we put the new polluting factories, or how is climate change affecting those least likely to have added to it, and they're the ones feeling the brunt of all of that. And so it covers the gamut on anti-racism. The training really is, in essence, a short course in project planning, really is what it's about. And so When you apply to the program to become an Earth Keeper, you will come with a project in mind, some sense of what you want to do on the ground in your location. And when I attended my very first training, or the very first training of Earth Keepers back in 2016, my project was to start the Creation Care Ministry for our annual conference. And there was a fun story with that. I had gone to annual conference that summer and asked Kim Ingram how I could get involved with Creation Care Ministries at the annual conference level. And she was so excited to have someone interested in being a part of this ministry. I said, so who do I talk to about it? And she said, well, we don't really have a Creation Care Ministry, but as Kim is so good at, she said, how about you help start one? And so she led me down this path to begin the Creation Care Ministry for the conference, and it's grown so much since then. And Kim is doing a wonderful job of really leading us in that today. But that was one example of projects. Projects have really ranged across this country among all the different Earth Keepers, from community gardens, helping to feed the undernourished people in our communities, to solar panel installations. There have been summer camp programs and vacation Bible schools set up that have a creation care focus. There's advocacy against new fossil fuel pipelines through a community in the mountains of Virginia. There's water use and water quality issues from different locations, from the parched West to the polluted rivers of the east of the country. Some churches or some Earth Keepers are redeveloping their church property. They're putting in rain gardens and pollinator spaces, even outdoor worship and spiritual experiences. The sky's the limit on the kind of projects that someone may want to bring and do some project planning and learning how to make this really happen in your own location. So that continues to happen throughout these trainings. My personal connection to Earth Keepers really increased exponentially this past fall when I was asked to come on staff with United Methodist Global Ministries in a brand new position that they were creating called the Environmental Sustainability Program Manager. And what that means is that, in part, one of my big responsibilities now is overseeing this Global Ministries Earth Keepers program, this training that over 7 years has already trained 275 United Methodists to carry out these kind of projects in their local settings. And we continue to offer these trainings. We just completed in March our spring online, totally virtual training. And this fall, we're going to be doing the first in-person training since before the pandemic. So we're very excited. If someone's interested in hearing more about the Earth Keepers program and how to apply and how to be a part of that training, the training dates are October 5 through 8. This fall, we're going to be in 3 locations, all on the same weekend. One is Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be also in Hartford, Connecticut, and in Denver, Colorado. The closest one to us here is probably going to be Birmingham. But the applications will be opening up by June 1st, and that information will be on the web page. If you want to write this down, it's umcmission.org/earthkeepers. umcmission.org/earthkeepers. And I believe we'll have that in our show notes as well. But I'm available to answer more questions about that. You will see information coming out through our Creation Care Ministry here in Western North Carolina, as well as on the e-news. So keep your eyes open if you're interested in Earth Keepers.
That's great, Jonathan. Thank you for sharing about the Earth Keepers program. I was really inspired by my peers that were taking the training as well. I wonder if you could share just a little bit of kind of the duration of the training and, kind of how the application process, so some of those logistical pieces. So for those that are listening and interested can have a better idea about that.
So the duration of the training will be, some portion will be online. So we have an online classroom through Teachable, and you'll watch some videos, you'll read some passages, some of those documents I was talking about from the United Methodist Church that speaks out. There'll be a couple of books to read from, and those will all be supplied. The cost is zero for someone to go to the training. The only cost really is your transportation to get there. Global Ministries will cover everything else. And the training will be over the weekend. Like I say, some will be before that weekend online, and then we will come together in those 3 locations. And each location will include some time to get to know one another, to do some networking, to connect with others who are going through the training. We will have some commissioned Earth Keepers who have been through this before come and meet us there and tell about their experience and what it has been for them, as well as each site will have a field trip or two to go see what churches are doing or what Earth Keepers projects have been in that area, or to a museum that speaks about anti-racism or other issues that directly affect kind of where we're going with our teaching. And so it'll be an exciting time there. And then we do follow this up with a platform that is open to everyone, not just Earth Keepers, that is called the Creation Care Network. And I'll put the information in the show notes for that as well. But this is a great place to connect with United Methodists who are interested in some aspect of creation care. And so this will be a way to continue to network together as Earth Keepers and others to learn about workshops and webinars and ways to learn from each other and get ideas about carrying forward in your own ministry.
I'm glad you mentioned the online platform where people can come and connect. My Earth Keepers project was kind of integrating creation care elements into disaster response and an eco mission kind of focus, which I think we'll hit on later in the show. But it allowed me to connect with people that were thinking similarly, that are doing similar kinds of things, and we could reach out to each other. And it was a great kind of, if nothing less, a sounding board or also an opportunity to learn and share with others what we were doing. I want to shift gears a little bit, Jonathan, and I'd like to talk about what creation care is, because I know that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And as God, the creator, I'd love for you to share some theological foundation or maybe some scriptural references or something that kind of lets our listeners see how we as United Methodists should connect with creation.
That's a great question, Brian. It's where we need to begin in a lot of our ministry and work. Through the years, as I served different churches across our annual conference, there were several opportunities where the church was already doing something around environmental issues, or they were interested. And often what I discovered was the approach was coming out of the science background. And because of the way our nation works and our politics works, so much of that has become politicized that many of our church members just discounted some of those efforts. What I discovered was we needed to approach it from our biblical, theological, spiritual side, because that's really where God calls us, not from the scientific understanding, though my personal view is scientists are simply discovering what God created and made and trying to make sense of it. But in the church, we need to come at it from our theological, biblical background. And so when you open up the scriptures, you see over and over again that it was an agricultural background, a setting in Israel in a place where many people were either growing food as farmers or they were shepherds of animals, and so much was tied into that. And so you find throughout the Psalms some of those beautiful passages I love in Job, where God just sets Job straight and says, hey, were you able to do all of this and make all this beautiful and wonderful? I think the stories that Jesus told, so many of Jesus's parables had to do with the seed and the soil and the birds and, the living water and all these references to the natural world that we in our current modern urban-minded world we live in find ourselves very disconnected from. And so we need to return to some of those thinkings. The theology of who Christ is and the connection to all of creation comes out in Paul's writing to the Colossians. But first and foremost, most people are going to think of Genesis chapters 1 and 2, those two creation stories. And in the midst of those stories, what God has done is given us a responsibility as humanity to care for all that God has created, that we are a part of God's design, and we are to step in and become stewards to keep and till, as some of our translations put it, to keep and till the garden. That garden is not just the Garden of Eden, it's the whole garden of God's creation. And so When we think of creation care and creation justice, these terms you hear a lot, sometimes interchangeably. They're really talking about what God has created and how we humans have come along and thought that we could do it better than God. Isn't that the eternal story of humanity in Scripture, is that we think we can do it better than God, and yet God's design interrelated, interconnected every part of the living creation, as well as the minerals and the air and the water and these things. And we've come along and recreated so much of what God designed to support life. In fact, you'll find some theologians speak of how we as humanity have decreated God's design. And now what we're discovering is that our recreation of that divine plan is not working for us. And so we're finding issues with pollution and with plastics that are found in the depths of the ocean and within brand new babies that have received these plastic particles through their mothers in utero. It's amazing what we have done to try to recreate better than God, and it's not working, all the way up to the big scale of climate change and things that are impacting our earth today. And so when we think about creation care and creation justice, what it's really about is calling the followers of Christ to return to our role as caretakers of God's creation, and not as species that think we stand above and somehow beyond all the rest of life on this planet, but seeing that we are indeed an integral part of the whole. What we do to the created order comes back and touches us. And so it's a tangible way for us to begin to love God and to love others. And when I say others, I mean all others of the whole creation. And so this is kind of where we come from, biblically, theologically speaking, as we talk about creation care.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Jonathan. Thank you for sharing that. I know for myself, I'm a bit of a backyard vegetable gardener, and I always think about some of those scriptures and those parables that Jesus talked about. You know, the sower, particularly now that I'm trying to fight the weeds in my garden. You know, it just, those things come to life for me when I have my hands digging in the dirt and out and experiencing God's creation. Kim, we're gonna come to you, and I'd like for you to share a little bit about how the creation care team functions, a little bit about kind of how what we've been up to and how we can resource churches to help them integrate the ethic of creation care, and particularly with Earth Day right around the corner, how that could be a focus for churches and how they can get plugged in and learn more about what our team's been working on.
Well, our team is made up of volunteers, and they're located around the conference, staff, clergy, laity, who come together and look for programs and ways to build the idea and the awareness around creation care. And one tool that we've come up with that could be very helpful for the local church is called the Green Church Initiative. And it is a planning tool that's available online. And it basically gives examples of actions that can be taken in each of 5 different areas in the life of the church: in worship, discipleship, stewardship, evangelism, and mission. And whether you decide to start in one area and focus just there, or whether you want to tackle all 5 areas, it is something that each church can take and do individually and tailor it to their own needs and their own ideas of where they'd like to go as a congregation. And so it's very nice because it's not something that anyone from the Creation Care Ministry team comes in and says, here's where you start. You can look at it and decide where you want to go and what's important. And I'll give a few examples, though, of many of our churches around the conference who are already doing some of these things. And I think as I give some of these, you will hear a lot of the same kind of things that Jonathan was mentioning that Earth Keepers are doing around the country. And so I just want to give a little example to show that our conference is already engaged in this. And really what we would like to do as we serve the local churches and as we do our work is to help all the churches find that this is available for them. And so one example, one of the neatest ones that we just learned about was that there are 2 churches who are in either have or in the process of installing some rooftop solar as their energy source. One of those is First UMC of Hendersonville, and the other is Brevard First UMC. Jonathan, I think you had seen, you shared with us that you had seen something regarding First UMC Hendersonville.
I did. Just a couple of weeks ago, I saw an aerial overhead photo from a drone or something of the brand new installation at First UMC Hendersonville, and it is amazing. We've got to get that picture onto the conference website and somehow share with folks what that is all about. It's a great story and how it's a collaborative effort that's made it happen and could bear fruit beyond just their rooftop to others as well.
That's lovely. And that is a nice outward statement to the community that the people in that church care about what is happening within God's creation.
Yeah, I would also add, too, that in addition to creating clean energy for their church in Hendersonville, I've had some conversation with Reverend Karen Easterbane, who's pastor there, and she spoke about the economic impact that it's going to have on their congregation, so that it's really going to cut their overhead cost. So it's always great when it's not only creating clean energy, but also makes economic sense. So I'm sure that folks on our team or Karen or folks at her church would be willing to talk to any clergy person or lay person that might be interested in exploring the possibility of putting solar on their building.
That's wonderful. And that is right, Brian. I do know that a lot of the things that we think of as related to creation care have the dual benefit of being economically, they save economically as well. And so that is one thing that is helpful as we all work to balance our budgets. Another really good example of some creation caring activities you can be found on Common Ground. And I don't know if you're familiar with Common Ground, but it is a 95-acre kind of campus ministry related to First UMC of Stanley. And they acquired 95 acres and couldn't decide exactly what to do with it, whether they were going to turn it into a place for their built church or not. And they decided instead to turn it into kind of an outside playground where you can worship and enjoy and care for and grow related to God's creation. And so they're a wonderful example of being engaged in creation care right here in the conference. They also have a few solar charging stations for electric vehicles that they have there. And then in Bryson City, at Bryson City UMC, they hold monthly discussions on topics related to environmental justice, which is what you were talking about, Jonathan, related to the justice aspects of creation care. Maggie Valley UMC, which is just down the road, they have held a book club related to a book called Becoming Rooted that is creation care related, and they host monthly hiking clubs. And they also have a garden ministry where they have shared, I think they said in 2021, they had about 2,000 pounds of produce that they shared through their food ministry with the community. And we have other churches throughout the conference that have garden ministries like that. And I know of a few, and I'm sure there are more, because gardening is very popular and it does the task of sharing with those who are food insecure. And I know that St. Matthew's United Methodist Church of Greensboro has one. First UMC of Stanley on Common Ground that I just mentioned, they have one. And First UMC of Hendersonville that we mentioned regarding the solar rooftop solar, they said they shared 3,000 pounds of produce in 2021. So this is really an area that can help your community, as well as you tend to the earth and you take care of creation as you do it. In a little bit different vein, we're all familiar with recycling, I think. And Harrison UMC in Pineville, who recently started their creation care ministry team, they're doing something kind of unique in the area of recycling, and they are collecting the plastic bags that you get when you go to the store, and they turn those in, and they're going to have a free Trex bench made out of the recycled plastic bags that they're bringing in. And then they will have that bench at their church, and all they have to do is collect and turn in the plastic bags. At Maple Springs United Methodist in Winston-Salem, which is my home church, we've had book and Bible studies, and we've hosted some creation care related speakers from the community. our children's ministry switched to reusable dinnerware rather than using disposables for our Vacation Bible School. And we host a month-long, in the month of October, a pumpkin patch, and used to get our pumpkins from New Mexico brought in. And now we buy our pumpkins locally, which really decreases your greenhouse gas emissions associated with that, along with supporting your local farmers. Loves UMC in Walkertown. I know they planted a pollinator garden, and this summer they are starting up a farmer's market at their church that they'll have every Friday evening. And as related to Earth Day, many of the churches around, and they would be too many to name, I'm sure, they hold a festival of God's creation, which is a service specifically dedicated to the recognition of caring for God's creation. And many, I think, also hold the blessing of the animal services in late September or early May. And just to mention, although it's not our church, but it is our conference offices, they're leading the way on many of these things too. And they just installed 4 electric vehicle charging stations in their parking lot. They have rooftop solar, and they have a LEED certification, which is related to energy efficiency and very stringent requirements that go with that for the new building that they built for the offices. So those are just, I mean, kind of an example of some of the things that are going on around the conference with which we're familiar. For those who might be interested, this Green Church Initiative that I mentioned, there's also a part of that where you can register to participate, and you pay a $50 fee, and then you work to accumulate specific points through specific actions in each of those 5 areas: worship, discipleship, stewardship, evangelism, and mission. And when you acquire a certain number of points in each of those, you can earn a Green Church Award, a certification that really is just from our conference, with the benefit of being able to put that certificate on your website if you'd like to. And it will show people who visit your website, whether they are your members or whether they are new people shopping for a church, that you are dedicated to caring for creation through your green activities. So far, we've had in 2022, West Market Street UMC in Greensboro earned the Green Church Award. And then this year, before annual conference, we anticipate presenting the award to St. Matthew's UMC in Greensboro. As they're finishing up, I think on Earth Day, for their Earth Day service, they're going to finish up some of the activities they want to do. And we just had another church, Harrison UMC in Pineville, register to participate. So we have a lot going on, but we would love to help churches learn how to do more. So if we can help you grow, expand, or start, please let us know.
Thanks so much for that. I think it just speaks to the commitment that we have in our conference and in our local churches for creation care. And one of the things I wanted to point out is our desire as creation care team leaders to integrate creation care practices throughout all facets of the church and not be an outlier. So each of these examples that you shared do hit on those 5 areas that we focused on: the worship, discipleship, stewardship, evangelism, and mission. And creation care can be a central piece of and a central thread to all of those areas. So thank you. Jonathan, I'm going to go back to you, and we've got some things happening that's coming up. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about what we're looking forward to and how people can get plugged in.
Absolutely, yes. So there are several things coming up. One is a presence that we're going to have at annual conference at Lake Junaluska this June. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you know who in your church is going to be your representative there at annual conference, as well as your pastor, have them listen to the podcast and learn about what we're talking about, and then tell them to come see us and find us. There will be a display table on the lawn outside of Stewart Auditorium where our creation care ministry will be set up. We're going to have an art contest, and anyone can enter into the art contest. The deadline for this is May 5th, but it's about caring for God's creation, and that is kind of the theme of the art we're looking for. We're looking for top three placers in each age category, and you'll find information for that on our website, and there'll be a connection in the show notes for it. We're looking at some pop-up events happening during annual conference where we're just going to, unannounced, just begin doing something for people to mill about and discover more about creation care. And in addition to that, we're going to be promoting 2 petitions for action on the floor of annual conference. One of those is related to a petition moving on to general conference for next year, but the other is related to our own annual conference, where we are encouraging and inviting local churches to really form that creation care team that you heard us talking about in your local church to get things rolling in that way. And so in addition to not only promoting those petitions, we're going to have information available for your church leaders to find out, how do you make this happen? How can we support you as a creation care ministry to carry it out in your local church? One of the ways that is possible is in worship. And in the fall, there is a season that sometimes works out better in the church calendar for focusing on creation. With Earth Day always falling very close to Easter, often within a week or so after Easter, most of us have turned our attention to rest and relaxation. If we're clergy, if we're families, we might be taking a spring vacation or something. And so creation care and focus kind of loses its place in the spring. But in the fall, there is a season of creation that has been around for 10 or 15 years now that the United Methodist Church has endorsed, and it begins on September 1st and continues until October 4th, which is the feast day of Saint Francis, when a lot of times those blessing of the animals have been held throughout history. And so the season of creation, there's planning, preparation for that. There's information on our website, and we can steer you towards some others. But during that whole season is an opportunity to do a number of different things in your local church. And we want to encourage that as well, from maybe a special worship service outside, or a small group study, or a tree planting is a great time in the fall to do that in your community. Just ways to celebrate God's creation. And of course, in the fall, we're always thinking of harvest. So finding ways to eat locally during those church events in the fall is another way to bring that focus as well. Something that you mentioned earlier, Brian, is your Earthkeeper project is dealing with eco-focused mission trips and how that happens. And so we have been developing this curriculum for eco-focused mission journeys. And we call it a journey really because it's not just the trip itself, not just 1 week or a weekend, but it's something that can begin to plant those seeds of what this can mean in local settings around your church community. And so there's service and education with these eco-focused mission journey experiences that are really focused on not just going and putting something back together, say after a disaster, or a hurricane, or a flood event or something like that, but looking at how can we put together not just the built human environment, but the larger system, the ecosystem that maybe needs to be repaired and healed in a way to help avoid future problems and calamities down the road. This mission journey can be in conjunction, as I said, with a disaster recovery site, or just recognizing some things that need to be done ecologically in somewhere across the conference. The curriculum for that really has been designed for youth and for college age, for campus ministry groups, but also for adult and mixed generational groups. So maybe family units want to come and they bring their children, maybe parents and grandparents can come as family units, or a church can sponsor one of these trips and work with us, and we can help put that together. And then take the ideas back to your local church and community that you learned from an immersion somewhere where you're doing this eco-focused mission work, and learn how to begin to do this kind of service in your local community. And so we're preparing a preview weekend. This is really designed for like youth group leaders, campus ministers. If you have missions chairpersons or leaders who do mission trips in your church and they're looking for something a little different and they want to come and find out what is an eco-focused mission trip all about, we are planning a weekend in September of this year. This will be September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, and we'll be housing up at Lake Junaluska and spending some time in the community learning about what this is all about, so that you can then plan that event for a larger group, for your youth group or campus ministry, or a team from your church, or a collection of churches from a community who want to go together and have an experience of an eco-focused mission embedded experience in a local congregation or a local community. So those are some exciting things. And then coming up very quickly is the fact that Charlotte is hosting General Conference in 2024. And so I was just on a Zoom call a couple of days ago with leadership of what's called the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. This is a volunteer group of folks across our denomination who is trying to guide and lead our churches in creation care and creation justice. And I was talking with them about how we, as the creation care ministry here in Western North Carolina, stand ready to help support any efforts that the denomination is wanting to do in this area at General Conference. And so hopefully that'll be coming together, and there'll be more details coming out as to how some of our people here in our annual conference can support and be a part of that when it comes to Charlotte.
Thank you, Jonathan. Lots of exciting stuff. Our team's been busy, and we're all passionate about this work. So Jonathan and Kim, thank you so much for joining us on the Means of Grace podcast today. Thank you for your work and for your leadership for our conference and pushing or opening the door to creation care ministry in our local churches and in our conference. We'd like to connect with you. Those that are interested, we want to help resource you. We want to learn what you're doing or find ways that we can support you. You can email us at creationcareWNCC@gmail.com. There's openings on our team. We are always welcome to have more folks on our team. We can get, district events happening. There's lots of ways that our team can support what you're doing in your congregation. You can also learn about, what we're doing and what's coming up at the conference website, www.wncc-umc.org/WNCC-creation-care-ministry, or search WNCC-UMC Creation Care. We'll have those links and those emails in the show notes for you to refer back to. So Jonathan, Kim, I'm grateful for you, and thanks for being on.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for letting us come and share with you and share with the people of our annual conference what God is doing through our own churches in caring for all of creation.
It's been a joy, and it is always good to work with both of you gentlemen. And I think it would just be great to work with a lot of the local churches. So let us know how we can help you.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation about the ministry of creation care in the Western North Carolina Conference. Thank you for listening to the Means of Grace podcast. Remember, every day can be Earth Day. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCC-UMC. Once again, that's at WNCC-UMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.